bar.
That extra gear, the first 3 steps.
Huge strides in the performance.
That I might not be the player I am today.
All right, welcome to another episode of Behind the Gear, and we got the beauties back. We got Wade Russell and Kevin Galerno. It's been a while, boys. I know up here in Ontario, Canada, we're still in lockdown, which is nuts. Rinks are closed and just trying to grind through it up here. But overall, everything's been going good. Wade, how you been, buddy? How's everything on your end? I know you got school going on too, so probably been keeping a little bit busy with that.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's been a grind, especially as of late. Like it's really slowed down. Everything's kind of, we're just waiting at this point to get to open up a little bit more, but can't really complain. I mean, fortunate to be golfing and like you said, a little bit of school, but it's all been manageable, and I do have a lot of free time. You just can't really do much with it.
Yeah, I know it's tough, eh?
Yeah.
Sucks. Kevin, how about you, buddy? How you been?
Been all right. Yeah, been all right. Been spending lots of time at home, and just like Wade said, just counting it down. Starting to get into getting ready for hopefully some summer stuff and on the ice and with some kids, or with some kids, and then maybe eventually on the ice. So yeah, just waiting it out.
Oh, totally, man. I want to talk a little bit.
Have you been doing?
Overall, I've been okay. I mean, I'm at home with my kids for school, which has been awesome. So I've been dealing with printing papers and giving snacks out, but they've been good overall. That's been fine. And yeah, just honestly, man, kind of just doing podcasts, trying to keep busy with different things like that. And overall, I mean, just trying to get planned. So anyone out there that's gone through this with any business, you're just trying to like plan. You don't know what's going to happen, but you're trying to plan ahead so that when things do open up or restrictions get lifted, or you're able to do stuff that you're kind of ready to go and not caught, kind of with your sitting on your hands. So that's probably been the most challenging thing over the last year. I think for everybody, it's just, even for families with the kids in school and all that kind of stuff, just trying to really manage everything. And then we don't know what's going on, and it's no one's fault. It's just, everything's unpredictable. So yeah, trying to almost guess at what's next and what you can do next is probably, the toughest part about it all, but it's been, overall, it's been okay. I mean, we're getting through it. So, and I think we're more kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel a little bit now. We're going to hopefully be able to slowly get opened and do it the right way and kind of roll into normalcy a little bit anyway. So we'll see what happens, but I wanted to chat with you guys, just kind of talking some hockey. I've had an opportunity over the last little bit to chat with, a lot of guys and you guys as well. And just some things I wanted to chat about though. How do you guys find right now playoffs in these months? Because normally playoffs are just kind of wrapping in the next week or two. Like it's done. Stanley Cup, is done. And we're kind of in the middle of it right now with the Stanley Cup playoffs and stuff. How do you guys enjoy these kind of daytime or these summertime games and stuff like that at night? How are you guys liking it?
I'm loving it. I mean, it's you got to find any reason to be positive. So the only thing that's positive is, and I think they've done a good job from when the season started of staggering the games. Now there's more teams playing, but I don't know if you remember, like when the season started, it was like 5 games start at 7 or 7:30, so they all end at the same time, and then there's, you know what I mean. There's not a ton of like layered games and stuff. So I think they've done a good job of that, and having some like 1 o'clock, 4 o'clock games on the weekends been nice, and when you're home and just having it on the background. But yeah, it's been good. I don't know how you guys feel though. Do you feel like the same about playoffs this year, like in terms of watching it and like the same level of excitement, like less, more, or the same?
That's a good question. What do you think?
Yeah, like and to Kevy's point, I mean, anytime you can get like a TV outside and watch a hockey game is like my favorite thing in the world. If you can get a TV set up outside and watch some games throughout the day and stuff. And we've been lucky. Like there's been some good getting into golf and stuff. Like there's been some good golf matches. Like, so it's been an okay kind of sporting time, I guess, to get us through. But yeah, it's tough. Like with no fans in the building, it's really like you watch that Colorado Vegas game. Like their barn is going bananas. Marchessault gets a hat trick last night. Like felt really real, felt normal. But then going back to like the Leafs series or even the Winnipeg Jets and Montreal now, like it's just ho hum. And what I always keep telling friends is like we've all played in beer leagues. Nobody cheering except for 12 sticks on the boards, right? When you score a goal or whatever. So it's like they're really just playing some of the teams in the best, like most competitive beer league in the world. Like they're pumping in a bit of crowd noise, but other than your bench, like there's really not. Or the Leafs had 550 fans, like right, like it's nothing. And then you go to Colorado or Vegas, and they have full capacity. So I think that plays a lot into it, the enjoyment of it all.
Yeah, it'll be interesting the next round though to see, because Canada will be able to cross the border, play in bigger crowds. It'll be interesting to see how those teams do. And I know everyone's. I just had this conversation yesterday. Everyone's like, the North, like they're gonna get pumped by all these other teams. The other teams are so much better. And I'm like, it's the NHL, man. they're all good. Every year
Yeah.
you see like, yeah, they're strong teams, but every year there's something like they're all good. They're all in the same playing field just because they played the same group, all year. That everyone was in the same position. Now, tell me Colorado doesn't look good for sure. Now all of a sudden Vegas has tied that series up, which is kind of crazy. Carolina, same thing. Like they're fighting hard. I thought Winnipeg give a little bit more of a push so far, and who knows? We'll see what happens. They got a couple more games, or at least one more game left. But I want to dabble into that Toronto series a little bit because even across the league, I think, Edmonton, Toronto, they were like the top in the North. They obviously have some crazy talent on that team and top end heavy, big time. Wait, you're a huge Toronto fan. And I grew up a Montreal fan. I like hockey now. I just like watching games, but I still kind of in my heart of hearts still like watching the Habs and stuff like that. And we've got, some guys from around here like Nick Suzuki to play there and Josh Anderson who played for London. So it's kind of cool to watch them. But what do you think of that series? Because there's no way, like if I had to put a big bet down on that series at the start of the series in game one, there's no way that I would have said that Toronto walks away from that series as a loser. Like there's no way. I thought they were too good. But overall, what's your overall kind of feel of that whole series being a diehard Blue?
Yeah, it's I don't know.
And don't cry. Don't start crying.
No. Like yourself, I try to find the middle ground and be fairly objective, but it was hard not. Like this was the first year that I really was like, yeah, I think they have a chance. Every year, and I talk about this all the time with my friends and with you guys. Like to me, like a rebuild, and that's what the Leafs have been going through forever, and supposedly amounting to something. Like a rebuild just means at the end of it, you have a really competitive team year over year that you can continue to hopefully push towards a cup with. Like I always go look back at Ovi. It took them 11 years with that Washington Capitals. They kept that core together every year, and it took them 11 years to win a cup, and now their fan base is already back to complaining about not getting out of the first round. 3 years out of a cup. Like don't get me wrong. It was really disappointing. I thought the Leafs effort in a lot of the games. And I also, it's hard to judge effort through TV, right? Like I'm not in the room. I don't know what these guys are saying to each other when they're tapping each other's pads before they go out. Like I'd like to think when you got Thornton, Spezza, Simmons, and those guys in that room, Bogosian on the heels of a cup win after a long career. Like I'd like to think that they cared. And I really do believe that they cared. They're professionals. But what does effort mean to you? What does it mean to another fan? What does it mean to me? Like to me, it's finishing hits. It's being relentless for the puck, even if it means you steal it and you just dump it in and change, and you don't even get a shift out of getting the puck. But watching them play, like it was really frustrating at times where I thought on the offensive side of the puck, they'd get up, but on the D side, they were a little bit sluggish. Their details weren't very good. Like we talk about that Dermott turnover in the overtime there, like just 5 feet inside the blue line late in a hockey game, in overtime at that point. Like just those little things that, again, I grew up always hearing about, and you'd like to think that they're maybe still teaching those things at that level. But the only other things I really got frustrated with were that part of it. And then like a lack of adjustments. Montreal plays trap really, really well. Like they basically try to hound for a goal early and then they trap. And I don't think I saw one like D hinge by the Leafs all series in those 3 games that they lost, where it was like, just kick the puck back, regroup, come back with speed. Like the Leafs had speed. What do you guys think of when you think of Montreal's D? Like what is the first word that comes to mind?
I think they play pretty heavy, like, and I think they're hard to play against. The guy had this conversation about Weber the other day, and like, he's a prick. Like he plays hard. I would not want to be standing in front of the net with him in front of the net. Like you're getting something, go in the corner with him, same thing. I think they kept it simple, and I think they can skate, and they really, like, to your point about like their speed, because the Leafs have a ton of speed. I think they kind of contained them pretty good and like really gapped out tight and like closed off and really pushed, kind of slowed Toronto down to that neutral zone a ton.
Yeah, and that's where the adjustments came in. I thought Montreal played their stuff great. They stood up at the blue lines. They forced the Leafs to chip the puck in. Watch how the Leafs go pursue the puck. They were always like letting Montreal get to it, trying to come in on the backside, get the wrap, and then Montreal makes a better play and they're out of the zone. And, I would have just thought, bring all the guys back, make little chip plays in behind Montreal's D's feet, make them turn, make them have to retrieve a puck and beat them with your feet. Because I'd like to think that Nylander, Marners, and Matthews are better skaters than Weber, Sherratt, Edmondson, right? Like, and I don't know, that's the way that I looked at it. So I was honestly mostly frustrated with Keefe, I would say, throughout the whole series. And just the lack of changes there. They had the skill. Yeah, Marner and Matthews are a little snake bitten. Like Price played great. He made all the big saves that he needed to and everything. But I just thought that they could have leveraged the team that they built and the skill sets that they required much better than they actually did. It's playoff hockey. Like the game changes. Penalties the same kind of penalties. Cross checks are a little bit more lenient, like, and they didn't embrace any of that stuff. Like, they didn't, Wayne Simmons was not the same in front of the net as Corey Perry was in front of the net.
Yeah.
And they're the same kind of player. They play the same type of role. Like, I don't know, the way that they embraced I think they really stuck to their guns with their style, and I think it bit them in the butt a little bit.
Totally. Kevin, what do you think of that series?
I still thinking about it, do the same thing, like zero analysis compared to Wade's analysis was 100%. Mine's zero. I just go like, I can't believe it. Like, I can't believe it. It's just say the same thing over and over.
But you've slept every night since. I haven't got one wink of sleep.
You know what though? And this isn't like, not that you didn't say this, but like, for anyone that's out there, like, they didn't care. They really didn't. Give me a break. Like, they cared. They may not have, delivered the product they wanted, or played as well as they wanted, or they didn't do the job they wanted to do. But like, there's zero part that wasn't like they were going as hard as they could every night. Make mistakes. I didn't grow up a Leafs fan. I, in fact, like, used to love watching them kind of lose and struggle. It was just because I was a hockey fan and didn't care either way if they won or lost. But like, I genuinely wanted them to win. Like, I really was kind of into that series and like really wanted to see them, those young guys win a series. To like, it's fun if you live in Ontario and they're winning.
Yeah, totally.
I don't, unless you're a Montreal or Ottawa fan, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's fun if you're in Ontario and Toronto's winning. So I would have loved it. I really would have. I can't believe it. I'm still saying the same thing. Like, no way. Not only like not win the series, but like lose 3 in a row. That is crazy. But there's a lot to be said for Montreal and just, I don't know, just doing a job. You talked about Weber. Like, you wouldn't look at Weber and say, oh man, he makes sick plays. Like, other than like offensively on a power play, and obviously he hammers the puck. Like, I watched the shift the other day, and the guy threw like a cross ice sauce. He knocked it down, got a piece of it, and didn't knock it right down to him. It was like a 50-50 puck. Then another guy got it, tried to flip it in deep, like by him, like kind of sauce it deep. He knocked it down again, got it, made a breakout pass off the ice. Like, never would be looked at as a play of any sort whatsoever, but like a sick play. And those type of like plays are the difference. Not that Toronto didn't have those type of guys, but a guy like that is invaluable, like just absolutely invaluable. And I was entertained by it simply because it was, as local of a series as you could get, but I can't believe the way it played out.
No, totally, man. I think the other thing too, I found that, like, if I was just looking at as just a hockey guy or fan or whatever, just watching the games and watching the emotion on both teams. Obviously, Toronto got off to a good start, being up 3-1 in the series, and then I don't know. I just felt like, kind of like you guys said, like, did they care? Of course they cared, but did they care enough to like go take that stick or go take that hit or go to the front of the net with and battle with Weber? Like, I don't know if they care. Not that they didn't care that much, but they didn't do that stuff. And I found Montreal just seemed like way more of a team. It's just like team toughness a little bit. You got Gallagher just running around, like, playing the way he plays, which is awesome. Like, I think any team in the NHL would take him in a playoff run, like, just works his tail off, tries to make simple plays, smart plays. But like, I just found Montreal just like a team, where I found Toronto was very like just separate. You had a lot of individuals, and a guy like Nylander, like, I love Nylander's skill. I absolutely love his skill. And I've talked about this before. I posted videos about him. Like, he is so good. But man, can you have a guy? And he was really good this playoff. Like, he was really good. But like, I just picture him just looking at himself in the glass, seeing how much his flow is sticking out of his ear flaps and how his hair looks. And like, that's what I picture with him. You know what I mean? And Matthews, I thought, played well. I thought he was hitting a lot. Like, he played a little bit grittier, than what I normally see him play in the regular season. Like, he's finishing hits, stuff like that. And then Marner, I think he is unbelievable, and he's a big cog in that whole offense. Like, he drives a lot of it, but I think he's a high risk player, right? So, he had a couple costly turnovers, but it's just that you're going to get that with him. That as a coach. I just, and I don't know this for fact, but I just feel like the pressure may have got to him. You know what I mean? Like, the fans and the media are like all over that poor guy. He's a young kid. He's, making a lot of money. So there's a lot more pressure on him. And I just still think he's an unbelievable player, but I just think, some of the pressure sometimes, I don't think we realize what it's like, when every time you turn to Twitter, turn to the newspaper, turn to the local TV sports or whatever, your name's smeared all over their place. You know what I mean? And so I think there's a lot of other things that go into play on all this stuff, but at the end of the day, it's how you manage it, I think, even as a team. And one of the things that I thought was unbelievable, I think Montreal was down 3-1. And they had interviewed Carey Price, and they're like, asking him reporter questions, like, "Are you nervous? Like, or whatever, like, or do you have any apprehensions that, like, you guys are gonna be able to keep this going?" And he's like, "No, I've no issues with anybody in that locker room. Like, I've completely tried. We're okay. Like, we're gonna be fine." And you see, like, one of your best players, and Carey Price, just like not even phased by any of it. Like, no, we're good. So we're totally fine. And he's a guy who could easily be like, "I'm my guy." Like, guys just thought 30,
Yeah.
like, you know what I mean? And he's like, "No, we're good. Like, everyone in there's pulling the rope. We're all good." Like, it was awesome, man. I was like, "Oh man." And then I'm not saying that did it, but they had that kind of vibe in there. You know what I mean? They had that kind of like energy as a team. And I mean, now even with Winnipeg, like, are you kidding me? 3-0. I thought Winnipeg was going to be way heavier. Like, I know they had some injuries and they've kind of been, but wow, like that series is crazy to me too right now, how they're just kind of manhandling that series,
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I like that you brought up pressure, because I was reading an interesting article. This guy did an analysis on like what teams, I don't know what his timeline was, how far back and how many seasons he went, but he kind of looked at what teams have historically been the most inconsistent. And he used all different metrics, I'm sure, like how when they go on like 10-game winning streaks to when they go on 10 games losing streaks, and just kind of that very spiky team. And so the top two teams, like by a strong margin, were Toronto and Montreal, which I think we could argue have probably the most rabid and insatiable fan bases and media kind of cults around them, right? And then the next two were Vancouver and Edmonton. And then there was a stark drop off from those two. And it's just like
that's across the entire league.
Yeah, and they were the most inconsistent teams.
Yeah.
So it's like playing in those markets is hard, man. Like, you can make a mistake down in San Jose when you're playing, the Anaheim Ducks on a Tuesday, and you don't really hear about it 3 weeks later. Like, there are guys still talking about, the whole Leafs power play down the stretch now, how bad it was, and they're bringing up clips. Like, it's a whole different animal. So I think, pressure is important. And then back to your point about their play versus Montreal, is like, who's Montreal's guy?
Yeah, like they're one guy.
Yeah, there's like 11 of them, right? With Mike banging a goal. Who the Leafs guys are. You would talk about the salaries, the money, and the cap all tied up, but it was with Montreal, and they didn't care who scored the goal. Like, it could have been Josh Anderson, could have been Gallagher, could have been Kotkaniemi, could have been a floater from the point. But with the Leafs, like, with Marner especially, like, you could tell he's the hometown kid. I get it. Like, he wants to be the guy. Like, imagine if the crown that he would wear for the rest of his life if he wins a cup as that player, being from there, drafted from there, and so on. So it's like, it's hard, and then again, going back to coaching, like, put him on the second line, give him a bit of breathing room. Like, to me, Deneau and Byron were unbelievable that whole series. It almost looked like they used sticks that were like 2 inches longer, like the way that they ate up the guy's ice and just pushed them to the outside. Like, yeah. Marner looked like every second he had no seconds, no time, no nothing. So he was like a little spooked, but I thought they played really well on the Montreal side of the park.
Okay, and like a guy like Deneau, right? People are kind of ripping that, he hasn't scored a goal. Like, that's not his job, man. His job's to force guys like Mitch Marner to not score any goals. That's his job. And if he puts a couple in, that's great. But like, and even the fans in Montreal have been on him a little bit because he hasn't scored and stuff. It's like, you don't even get the game, man. Like, that's not his game. Like, even Gallagher, like, yeah, he's a point guy. But right now in the playoffs, if he gets 2 goals the whole playoffs and they go on a good run, he's doing his job. And I know he wants to score more, don't get me wrong, but I mean, even Marner, you're right. Like, Marner was king of the castle for the last couple of years, right? Except for the playoffs when they lose and everyone hates. But I mean, he's unbelievable. He's, top 10 in scoring. He's assisted on so many of Matthew's goals, whatever. They lose they lose this game. Now they want him out of town. Yeah. Now they want to trade him. It's like, wow, it's crazy. And that's huge. Go ahead, Kevy.
But to your point, like about Gallagher, like, they're on him about scoring. The guys in the room don't care who scores, and like, they won. Why are you on him? But if you were a Leaf, okay, and let's say the Leafs won in 5 or 4 or 6 and won fairly handily, but Marner and Matthews still had 1 goal each, and they had the same stats, but they somehow won the series, they'd still be getting eaten up in the media. And that's like what you were saying, Wade, about like them. It's a hard place to play. Even if they do win, they still have to score. Like, it's just that type of, they're under a type of pressure where winning matters, but you also have to win and have to produce for them. And that's tough for them.
Yeah.
I'm not giving them an out. Like, they need to be better, but like, that is just to your point. It's like it's a tough way to go to sleep and wake up every morning.
Oh,
not crying the blues for these guys that are making 11 sheets and living a pretty good life, but it's I don't know. I feel for him a little bit. Not to say I'm like it's an out and they need to be better and tough, all this stuff, but like I feel for him a little bit. I'm like, man, that's a long off season, and now the regular season doesn't even really matter, really. Like it does, like they got to make the playoffs, but like Marner can be fourth in scoring next year again, and he can have a sick year, and guys, the media will start to like him, and fans will they'll come around on him again. But at the end of the day, he's going to be in tough, and I don't think he should be out of town, or I don't think he's done. They're still young.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
I didn't realize Waito was 11 years though. Like what you said about Ovechkin and like that core group.
I think 11. Yeah.
Okay, call it 9 or 10, whatever. You know what I mean? Either way, that's a long time. I didn't realize it was that long, and a lot of credit to them for sticking with that group. So.
Yeah. No, it's there's a lot of different ways to look at it. Like JT doesn't get hurt game 1. Do they win that game? And then they go on to win the next 2 straight and it's a sweep, right? Like obviously, that domino fell and it played out the way that it did. And if it didn't, then it would have played out differently. But it's, like what Dwayne, you said really early in the podcast is there's a ton of parity. Like every team, everybody trips the leaves for being analytics, numbers, this, that. First of all, every team's using analytics now, whether you like it or not. I don't care who your favorite team is. They're all using them to some degree. Now, does one organization have their own in-house analytics that maybe are better and a little more accurate? Maybe teams don't listen. How much are the coaches adopting them? Like there's so many things, but it's just like every team's pretty much trying to do the same thing as everybody else. It's just what chess pieces do they have versus the other group, right? Like it's they're all cut from the same cloth with what they're trying to do.
Yeah. And I think too, there's something to be said about just like, I'm not saying this is no knock on any players, but like there's something to be said about character. And do you have balls to play the game hard? Do you have balls to play in the playoffs? Because I've been fortunate to play in some playoff games you guys have as well. And no matter what the level or what the league, like playoffs is different, man. Playoffs is different. Like it's a totally different mindset, totally different mentality. You're going to war with your boys or your girls, and you want to win. You know what I mean? And like, so I think that's a big thing too. And unfortunately that doesn't really show up on the analytics. Right. But that character piece, and even like you see McKinnon came out, I think this week or whatever, and said, I'll basically, paraphrasing, but I'll take a hometown discount to play in Colorado with this group again. I love these guys. Like everyone's always like, oh, he's so underpaid. He's like, yeah, it's fine. I'm fine. Like I'll do what I want to do. And I know it's all about like, well, if he signs for more, then the guy behind him can sign for more and you're helping all the players out. Yeah, you are, sure. But, or are you doing what Toronto did and everyone's out for me, holding out, getting more money, and then now you have a team that might blow up because you're only gonna have 4 players on it, right? And a bunch of $700,000 players. Like that's where they're at right now. Like they got a couple guys that may not be able to sign back that are really good players and really big pieces of their core, but they're not gonna be able to probably sign because they have no cap room, right? So Crosby did it. Like Crosby, probably could have got more money. He probably could have went for the Stars when he wanted to sign, but he didn't. He wanted to keep Malcolm there, so they made a bit of a deal, like a little bit of a deal. But and look at them, they won 3 cups. Like, so it just depends. Like I don't know, it's not an easy road because at the end of the day, like get paid, man. If you can get paid, no doubt. But it's that's a tough one for me. It's just like so yeah. To your point, like I don't want to keep beating up the series, but. It is really, really interesting kind of how the whole thing played out. And then when you start talking like this, have conversations about it, there are so many other things that come into play, whether it's media, whether it's fans, whether it's no fans in the building. Like there's always other little pieces that kind of come into it that do affect outcomes of games and series,
And even the cap projections, like COVID doesn't hit, let's say Seattle has a great launch and then that TV deal hits. Well, what does the cap look like now? It's staying flat now because the league's taken obviously a big hit with no fans in the stands. Yeah. But when these contracts were signed, there was no COVID. Like, Dubas is pretty forward thinking. He's got Lance Purdom as his assistant GM who wrote the cap. He wrote the most recent CBA for the NHL. Like that's where he worked before. Like they're thinking of all these things. And then, yeah, they are definitely their hands are tied now. And that's just the circumstance. So it'll be interesting to see how they navigate it with trying to bring in different pieces. And then, leadership, like how much easier it is to listen to Bergeron. He won in 2011, right? Like I'm going to do whatever that guy says. If he tells me to shut up, and just go block shots, get off in 30 seconds, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Yeah. So it's part of culture is developing it, but a little bit of it's luck too. Like if you can do it on the heels of a win and then you can keep the cornerstones of the guys that did that, then I think it just bleeds throughout the organization over time. And the Leafs, that's what they're missing right now is it's really hard to sell people on an idea when it's never happened in most of our lifetimes. Right. Like, how do you say like this? We're going to be the team. We're going to be the year. Like they're probably full of self-doubt and I don't really blame them. Like it's so hard not to be with, the Tavares injury, the game sevens, the 3-1 leads, it's all built into the narrative now.
Yeah. Oh, that's crazy, man. Real quick though, what do you guys think of the next series as far as, who do you think will go the distance here of the, the last kind of 8 teams here that are still going? Who do you guys feel comfortable with as far as getting to that kind of Stanley Cup finals?
3 days ago, I think everybody would have put all their money on Colorado, like saying no chance, up 2-0. But that series, the winner of that series, I find it very unlikely that the winner of that series doesn't go to the finals.
Yeah,
I would think. I would still think Colorado gets through it. Going back home now, but that'll be a very interesting final 3 games. Assuming it goes like 3 more to 7, that's kind of the series I'm keyed in on, and like making sure I watch a bunch of, especially with the fans there. Like, not that the other, Canada, the Montreal series is the only one that doesn't have fans, but just like Vegas is kind of known for the crazy show, and it's nuts. And I find that one pretty exciting right now. Plus, there's been lots of goals, which is just exciting to watch. So, yeah, I find it unlikely the winner of that series doesn't end up in the Stanley Cup final, especially knowing now that they will play the Canadian, either Montreal or Winnipeg.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Eh? What do you think, Wado? Do you got anybody that you kind of?
I really like Vegas when they play their best. I think they play like both ends of the rink really, really well when they're going, because they are, I think, ever since they came into the league, I thought that first inaugural team was really good, but we're just always relentless on the puck. Like, they're never not hounding down the puck, getting it back. And then when you compare them, especially to Colorado, obviously, Colorado's a great pick too. I just think Colorado's D, they're very mobile. Like, Makar is amazing, and they got some really mobile D, but I think, you look at the experience that they have in the back end of Vegas. You got Pietrangelo, Martinez. Like, you have some really solid guys. Fleury's in your net, all cup winners. Yeah. I think Martinez with LA, Pietrangelo is recent with the Blues, and then obviously Fleury. And I think they just play like that style that, again, they don't really care who the guy is. Puck to the net, they crash the net hard, like every single shift. So other than that, I'm always big on Boston, man. As much as I'm a Leafs fan and I hate them, like it's so hard to bet against that room and that leadership. And Chara passes the torch to Bergeron, and he's obviously running with it. Like, you can't tell me that Bergeron probably couldn't score 50 goals in a season if he wanted to, but he's just the best 200-foot player, I think, to ever play the game, and has no problem being in any role, in any situation. Like, that guy is as calm as they come, and second rounder, like, he's awesome. So I love watching him. And then,
did you see the record he just tied with his nomination?
No. He 10 Selke.
Yeah, he's tied Gretzky for 10 consecutive years. Gretzky was the Hart, I believe. But yeah, his Selke nomination, like, is 10 straight years of being nominated.
That's consistent.
In this day and it, like, not taking anything away from Gretzky, but it's been over it. Every single hockey outlet's been over it 1,000 times, like, winning awards in those times. You know what I mean? Less teams, less players. Like, 10 years in this era is crazy.
Yeah,
that's impressive.
Consistency, man. Those teams you guys mentioned, though, Boston especially, and Vegas too. Like, Boston has some, like, obviously some firepower, but like, when you think of Vegas, like, who's their guy? Like, Mark Stone's their guy, Fleury's their guy, but they kind of win by committee. They've got like other guys playing roles that are chipping in. That they got some, like, Carlson. They got some really good players. Don't get me wrong, but like, I don't think they care who scores. Whereas you look at Colorado, they're unbelievable too. Like, they're deep, but their top 2-3 guys are like, whoa, that's like kind of Toronto. You know what I mean? I think they've got a cool group in Colorado where I think they do like love it, like playing for each other. They're, I just think at the end of the day, if you got a really, really good coach who can shut that, and good players, I should say, that can shut those top 3 down or shut that first line down, man, that's huge, right? And then you can deal with the next 9 players, right? Like, up front. So I think, if they've kind of figured out the last couple of games, they're playing a little bit more of a shutdown game, they're able to kind of push those guys out of the way a little bit, and then who knows what happens. And I think Boston's the same. Like, you've got Bergeron blocking shots, winning draws. You got Marchand playing the power play, playing penalty kill. Like, then you've got Krejci, and I think Hall was a great addition there. He's a good secondary. I don't think he's like a number 1 guy on a team. I think he's a good secondary guy that strengthens your lineup, and he showed that.
He's fought twice in the playoffs now, Hall.
Yeah. That's right.
Good guy. And I think he's asked for both of them. He said, let's go. Like,
yeah, no, totally. Right. So yeah, like, doing what you need. And I think for Hall, man, I think if anybody needs to have a good playoff and show that he cares and loves the game, wants to play, and he's a competitor, it's him. Like, poor guy's been bounced around, first overall pick. Like, he's had a little bit of a tough go. And good for him. I always got some opportunity to play on a deep team, a good team that kind of suits his style and his play. And man, when you watch him play, like, I don't know if you guys remember or realize like how fast he is. He flies, man. He is so quick when he gets moving. It's crazy. So yeah, it is cool. And I'm kind of with you guys. I think those two, Tampa is another one that I like a lot. I don't know how they'll face up against, the winner of Colorado, Vegas, or, if they end up going up to the finals or Boston or whatever. But, and another team that has impressed me is the Islanders. And just how they like keep hanging around, and they just like, they're dirty. Like, as far as they just work, they're, nothing's pretty. It's all dirty work, but they get it done, man. And they're playing unbelievable. And that's another one. That's another team I feel it just like plays a real good system. Everyone's bought in. They got 4 lines. Like, their fourth line plays a ton and hammers, like, hits. Like, when they're on the ice, you see guys looking around. Like, where are they coming? Where are they? You know what I mean? It's like a bunch of fighter jets out there just fucking throwing bullets around, right? Like, so I think, yeah, it's interesting to see like those kind of teams that are just like win by committee. Everyone's bought in. Everyone kind of knows their role, and they're playing it really well. It's pretty cool for sure.
Yeah,
right. So Montreal's in the cup, then that's what we're saying.
Yeah, that's what everyone's said pretty much. Yeah.
Montreal, what do you final?
Yeah,
it cool. Could be. Yeah, because assuming Tampa finishes that, they'll get Montreal or the Islanders. Or sorry, they'll get Boston or the Islanders. Which but hey, I would have never guessed this. All those stats obviously after Toronto lost came out about like players making 10 million or above, having like Carey Price being the first player ever making more than 10 to win a series. Is that not crazy?
That is nuts. Yeah.
Like the first ever. That I could not believe that.
Yeah.
But I guess it makes sense having Ovechkin or does he make over 10 now?
No.
But if he does,
he's needing to sign. I think he's UFA this year.
He is.
Because I was going to,
something's going to happen here, and I don't even, I don't know if he will go over 10 or not. I mean, he's worth a lot just for what he's, and you've heard people talk about just for what he's brought to let alone the cup, just like the amount of money they made off this guy. I mean, the league and Washington, he's worth every penny they pay him, but he's also at the end, he's got, I don't know how many more years. I'm sure he'll play for a while trying to catch records and keep playing. He's still good. I mean, geez, he still scores. He's still very, very, very effective. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what he does sign for sure. I wanted to kind of shift gears and go to the OHL a little bit. So we just had the OHL draft, which, if anyone's in another country or obviously in the States too, we have 3 major junior leagues in Canada. So we have the Western League, which is basically Western Canada. We have the Ontario League, which is mostly Ontario, a little bit in the States. And the Western League has a couple US teams as well. And then we've got the Quebec League. So those are the 3 kind of major junior leagues. And every year there's a draft. And in Ontario, it just happened with kind of that minor midget. So basically U16, so 15-year-old players could get drafted. Now, 2 things happened in the draft. Well, one big thing happened in the draft was the first girl to get drafted. And she's actually from the London area, plays AAA for the Elgin Middlesex Chiefs. And she was the first girl to get drafted, obviously, as a goaltender to Sarnia, which is pretty cool. What are your thoughts on that as far as you're her mother? She gets drafted, which is wicked, like huge feather. It's awesome. Like I think it's a really cool thing. Tons of I think she's on Hockey Night in Canada. It was awesome. But what are your thoughts on that? If that is your daughter, like do you let her play in the OHL and try to play and probably get a school package, which would be great. You know what I mean? Or do you sway her another way and try to go to college or university and go more on the women's stream, Olympic team, things like that? We'll start with you, Kevin. What do you think?
So tricky, and I think maybe you look at it differently if you're her father versus if we're just, kind of in the business and a hockey guy. If it was my daughter, you got to choose your words very carefully here, I think. But you know what junior hockey is about, and it's obviously amazing for players. Would I want my daughter in that setting, year round? I don't mean this to be negative or derogatory against junior hockey or anything, but I'm not sure I'd want her to be, especially as a young woman, at 16, 17, that's maybe not where I'd want her right away. But for her development, and then let's say you're saying, okay, we're going to give it a go. A team does decide to take her as a second goalie. Well, where is she going to go from there? I don't know this. I'm not involved in Hockey Canada, but I've heard that they're not a big fan of high-end women playing men's hockey. So is she putting herself in a bad situation, with them to play in men's hockey and in junior hockey, as opposed to playing girls junior and then committing to NCAA maybe. And if that's the case, I'd want her going, I'm sure she can lock up a scholarship to pretty much any NCAA school she wants at this point, or very soon, I would assume. And that's probably going to put her on the best road to the Olympic team if she wants to play there and things like that. But as a trailblazer playing in men's hockey and trying to play pro, another woman playing in the pro ranks, that could go that way. I'm glad I don't have to make that call for my daughter right now. That's a really, really tricky one. I mean, it's amazing I think it's awesome that it happened, and it's amazing. And I hope she gets to go to camp and shows well, just to prove, at the very least, prove that she can play at that level, play junior, whether it's OHL, junior B, whatever. But it'll be interesting to see what happens there.
Yeah, I know for sure. Wait, what do you think on that?
Yeah, it's as Kevin said right off the bat, it's a very unique situation. I think the game is getting better. I think it's definitely getting more tolerant. We're learning a lot more about how we need to be treating people in team settings and things like that, and being more, aware of even what you're saying. If somebody isn't necessarily outwardly identifying as that, but they, your words have, consequences a lot of times, depending on who you're speaking to and who you're speaking around. So is the OHL, is it ready, to have a woman in the locker room all the time? It's really hard to say. I think it's getting closer. I think, it would really be on the Sarnia Sting to cultivate that clearing the culture and really work with that group to make sure that they, they have a mature group that could handle that. I thought her quote was great. I didn't see it. I don't know if she said it on live TV or anything like that, but it was along the lines of just treat me like anybody on the team. I'm a teammate, and that's the way it should be. Just unfortunately, for whatever reason in society, young boys, and then the way that gets ingrained in the hockey culture, we weren't the best at the way that we spoke and the way that we acted and the way that we did certain things. Right. And so it's making sure that they're comfortable and that she would be comfortable in that setting. I got to think it's hard to turn down from just a hockey thing. I got to think it's hard to turn down college route as a woman. Right now, again, most of the way that you're going to be playing, I don't think you're going to be playing a 62 game series coming out of the OHL, even if she has success there. I think, the college route and more tournament based format and weekend based format is just more conducive to success at the women's game. So I'd probably look at it that way from a hockey thing. But just if they do go that route, I hope that she gets treated respectfully and that is given the space to do well. And hopefully, the team does a good job protecting her and making sure that she's supported, because she's a trailblazer. This is crazy. The first time that, totally. At her age, and it wasn't like a 15 round, feel good thing. I think it was the 12th round, maybe 13th, something there. They believe in her, and she is a good enough player. She's a big game player. So it's definitely an interesting story to watch, but it's really cool to see as well.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think the other thing too, she's played boys AAA hockey her whole life. So she's been around that culture. She's been in the locker room. She's had to get changed in other rooms or come in, half dressed or whatever. So I think that kind of stuff, she probably is unbelievable at navigating. And sorry, I didn't mention, it's Taya Currie. Sorry, I should have said it off the top, but again, 15-year-old female drafted to the OHL. And so I think that part of it, I think, is okay. And even the culture, I agree. But man, girls hockey has their own culture too. I think we'd all be shocked. You walk into a girls locker room, what they're saying, what they're talking about, the language, and just you'd walk into a guy's locker room and sometimes you'd be shocked at what they say if you've never been in one before, So I think by the sounds of it anyway, she has a pretty good handle on all that stuff. The other thing too is even the shooting and the physicality and things like that at that level, right? For a guy, girl, doesn't matter. But to your point, Wade, usually 16-year-old goalies aren't going to play the first year anyway, unless you're exceptional. So that'll give her a year of maybe playing junior or, figuring it out from there. And realistically, if she is good and she can play, then she'll get, pretty much a half or a full scholarship to a Canadian university if that's what she chooses to do. And it's hard, right? Because I think as older guys now, especially for me as an old, if my daughter ends up being, something like this happens or whatever, and she's I want to do this, Dad, just to prove to everybody that girls can play boys hockey and I can play junior. I'm all right, go ahead. I'd love to see you go to school and get a scholarship and play but if this is what you want to do, and she sounds like she's got a pretty good head on her shoulders. Even some of the interviews, she's young, obviously, but did a really good job, speaking and stuff like that, to reporters, I think she's on with Ron McLean on Hockey Night in Canada. She did a really, really good job. So at the end of the day, I think she's kind of getting to that age where it's probably a little bit more her decision than anybody else's, what she decides to do. Right. And she's been and I know the team, and obviously you guys know players on that team too, but she's been probably their number one for the last bunch of years. And there's been other goalies that have come in and out of there, and she's been arguably their best goaltender. So, you think about it, she's the best goalie in minor midget. What happens to usually the best goalies in minor midget? They get drafted, and not to say that they're going to play, but they get an opportunity to go to camp and show their stuff. And if they develop properly, they may get an opportunity. So she might get that chance, which is amazing. And it does change, as far as the culture here, but you see a lot of girls now. I know like the Hershey Bears hired a female video coach, and I was just talking to the coach the other day. It was awesome. She's great. Like it was, so, it may be a little bit weird the first time you walk in the locker room or you walk by the coach's office, as a player, you're naked or you got a towel on. But I think a lot of these women that are in these positions, they don't care. Like they're just like, they're doing their job. They're good at what they do. They're part of the team. Like obviously you're respectful. You're not walking around naked or things like that, but you know what I mean? It's just kind of treated like anything else. And I think once you get used to it and comfortable, then it's normal, and it just becomes the new normal. And so hopefully this, I guess it'll be really interesting to see how this plays out and kind of where it goes, because it is really cool. It's the first time it's happened in our area, which is great. But I think it was Sabarin, the other goaltender out west, that was Team Canada's. Like she was on the Olympic team for a while, but she played out in WHL for a bit, like for her junior, and then she played pro and stuff like that too. Is that the right? Am I saying the right name?
I think that's the name, but I don't know her story well enough.
I don't. I'm not familiar with that either.
Played boys.
And you're also,
sorry?
Also gonna just for Sarnia, good for Sarnia. I don't think Sarnia's just like, hey, we're doing this so for all the clicks and for all the social media. Like they obviously have a plan. They like what they saw as a goaltender. So like this isn't like a hey, good for you, Sarnia, for doing this. Well, no, they just made a draft pick that they wanted. You know what I mean? It was a potential goalie for them, and obviously they have a plan on how to deal with the things when it gets to if they're allowed to have rookie camp or coming to main camp, this summer or whenever it is. So yeah, they got a little bit of stuff on the back end to like just make everything, like you said, okay, but and comfortable for everybody. But like they just saw a goalie, I'm assuming, and that goalie was the best possible player for them, and they made the pick. So
yeah.
I think it's good all around.
And it's hard to can you pass up on like a really good goaltender that deserves to be drafted just because she's a girl? You know what I mean? Like
I agree. Yeah.
It's like,
who knows?
Somebody should have drafted her 100%. She's one of the better goalies in this area, and other goalies got drafted, so she should be drafted. Like,
yeah,
she's put those mid. Yeah.
Yeah. And those mid to late round goalie picks, let's say for the last 10 years of the OHL, like you're kind of throwing out a flyer. Like, no, they're really good in minor midget. And like you both have said, they're not playing next year. So like, well, what are they going to do over the next year to 2 years? Maybe a year in junior B or major midget or whatever. And then maybe as a backup. And then that's when it's 2 years later that you're like, this is when they may be a goalie for us in most cases. I'm talking about like mid to late rounds. So unless something crazy happens. So 2 years from now, who knows?
Yeah,
that's a lot of development for her and growing for her, as it would be any player that's 15 years old.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, 99% or 90% of the players that just got drafted this weekend are a year or 2 years out.
Yeah, from playing.
So there's only going to be a handful of them that are in the league next year, like a couple, and a bunch of first rounders, maybe a couple surprises, but like, so they're all just like, no, we see a goalie that's doing really well at their level, and they think they could show a lot of potential in a year or two. So I think it was awesome to see.
Oh, that's good. And then kind of a bit of a darker story. I want to bring this to light because any parents out there that have young players that are potentially going to play junior hockey, it doesn't have to be the OHL or the Dub or the Q or anything, but just playing hockey and just some of the lies that are told to these kids. And and this has happened numerous times. So I want to bring this story up. I've honestly probably talked to at least 5 families over the last bunch of years where this specific situations happen, where a scout or GM or whoever agent calls them, says, hey, you're going to get drafted here in the 7th round. Be ready, be by your phone, and then 7th round comes and goes. And then you get another text or call saying, hey, it's going to be the 8th or 9th, just hang tight. It's coming. And then the whole draft comes and goes, never gets drafted. And then usually crickets after, that team isn't going to reach back out and be like, hey, sorry, we some things change, which happens. Right. But that's the thing that just that honesty, right? Like just being honest about it. I had another young boy I was talking to who was playing on a junior team, didn't want to go back there. So they just traded him like 7 hours away. Never talked to him, never called him, never told him where he's going. Just like, oh, now your rights are up in, Timbuktu. I'm like, what? Right. So it's like, it's all that, like, just being a person, being a human, like talking to people, you know what I mean? But I hate that and for the most part, in the guys' game, it's grown men that are, not willingly trying to hurt people, but it's grown men affecting young boys' lives, right? And not like that's hard on a kid when your hopes are up to go play junior, your hopes are up to get drafted, and you're getting strung along, and then nothing happens. It's like, well, like, man, really? So I don't know if you guys have heard stories like that or if you guys have had anything like that, but I've talked to like a number of players about this after the draft and after it's happened, and it's a lot of the same story, right? Don't worry about it, man. The draft is not that important, which it isn't. It's a good feather in your cap, and everyone wants to get drafted. You're proud of that. You're honored by that. It's awesome, right? But it's not the end of the world. Like, you're gonna have a couple of weeks of hell because everyone's gonna be posting their new hat that they got from that team or their new jersey or whatever, and then it'll settle down a little bit, and then you get back to work and then see what happens in 5 years. See where everybody is in 5 years, because I don't think it's a sprint. I know it's not a sprint. It's a long process. It's a bit of a marathon, right? And I think, for any parents and kids going through this, it's going to suck, man. The first 24, 48 to 2 weeks is brutal because it's all you hear about. It's all you talk about. It's in your head. You're definitely going to be top of mind on it. But once it subsides a little bit and, if you have a good support group around you that can help you get through it, be like, no, man, we're going back to work. If you really love the game and you want to play, you can play. Just keep working, keep doing the right things, keep getting better. But I didn't know if have you guys heard stories like that, or you guys been involved with stories like that, or has it happened to any of you guys personally, whether it was, draft, junior, whatever? Start with you, Wado.
Yeah, I didn't get called on draft day at all, so did not happen to me. But no, you hear about that stuff, and I remember the hard thing always was discerning, like, especially back then, there was way less Twitter and stuff for me or my parents even to like search out who's who and right. Who's actually representing an organization. Because you'd get, scouts all the time at games that had the tracksuit and everything that would try to come up and, ask you if you, and it made you feel good. It made you feel recognized and acknowledged. But, it was very easy for kids to look way too much into that. And this is just, the son of an uncle, of a cousin, of a brother, of from the organization. So it's that kind of stuff happened a lot. To your point, the one that I wanted to kind of bring up though with the draft and being resilient and not, having it be the be all end all was Andrew Mangiapane. Just scored the game-winning goal for the World Championship, was not drafted to the OHL. I got his lead prospects page up here. So at U16, he put up 39 points, 46 games in the GTHL. Like, that's pretty good. Usually, those guys kind of get drafted. Doesn't get drafted, so he plays U18 for a year, 36 points in 32, walk on with Barrie, and then puts up like 51, 104, 106. I don't know if he was a draft pick, like 6th rounder to the NHL, goes from being undrafted in the OHL to 6th rounder to the NHL, scores a game-winning goal in the World Championship. Like, there's tons of those kinds of stories, right? Like even Bergeron being second to the NHL, like he was passed over, and I'm sure he just put his head down and worked. So I do think though, I got a cool opportunity with the Knights to take players on their player tours when I was there. Yeah. For a little bit, just to kind of fill in when the assistant GM or certain staff couldn't be available. And the one, Joey Poljanowski, I think is his name. He works for Arizona, or did. Now, he kind of took me through the first one, and I got to kind of learn from him. And the one thing that he said that I made sure of, I kept repeating anytime I got the opportunity was, there's going to be a lot of firsts here. This is how they would dress the families as they were shown through the building. Like, first girlfriend, maybe first, first breakups are going to be here, first prom may be here. Like, there's a lot of first car, like there's all these different things. So that's the kind of way that I think organizations need to approach players, is with that understanding that you hold a lot of responsibility. Like, they're only 16 when they're coming to you. Yeah. Very, very impressionable age. And a lot of, it can be an awesome experience. You can really mentor them and really set them up for the rest of their lives. Or you can, like you said, ship them off, don't care about them, treat them like a chess piece. And it's, really destructive for kind of their self-worth and their beliefs and stuff. So I think it's getting better, but yeah, the organizations, especially in the scouting, like, why, tell anybody what your intentions are, where we're going to pick you, or why give them that at all? I know. Just let the draft happen and then congratulate them and welcome them, after the fact.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you bring up a really good point that the organizations do have a big responsibility, man, when you're dealing with junior kids, OHL kids, whatever, but they're kids, man. They need help. They do need help on that first breakup. I'm not saying that your coach or your GM is going to be sitting them down talking about breaking up with girls, but, they need to know that they're supported, that they can talk, that they can, you know what I mean? I think that is huge because there's so many life things that you went through. I went through when I was playing junior, and, I was fortunate to have good billets and a good coach and a good group of guys. And, so I think that's really, really important for sure. Kevin, have you gone through anything like that at all or heard any stories about that?
Yeah. I didn't get drafted either, and I was under no illusions that I was. I went through the draft. I'm sure you, Blazer, were the same when you like still went to the draft. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I was still live. I did not the draft at all, but I had a buddy that went and sat there for, I think it was 19 rounds at the time, never got drafted. And ended up walking on the Sudbury and played a couple years later. But imagine that, like 2 days of just like sitting in a bleachers, like, or in a seat in the stands, just waiting for your name and never gets called.
I went like with a buddy. I went with a good buddy of mine that was going to get drafted. Like I went like my, flip flops and shorts. Like it was in the summer and did not go like 100%. I was just keeping him company, and he was a good buddy, and he ended up getting drafted, and it was actually fun for me. It was like motivating for me to see all these kids get drafted and be like, I didn't want to play in the O, but anyway, that wasn't the story. It was more that like, I think we have these conversations, or you do, and I do, and Wade obviously has done it as well, but like with the parents that don't get drafted, and it's like the end of the world for a minute. And then you realize it does suck. You don't get that Instagram post and thanks to all my friends and family, but like anyone that does get drafted has to get back to work like immediately. There's no guarantees. And can you imagine on like Wado, when you're on one of these, I was thinking about this weekend, like on one of your walkthroughs with players, if like, I don't think you could get away with doing this, but like, I was like, what if a team just sat down at the players and parents meeting and said, hey, and went through every round, like of all of the first round picks over the last 10 years, 4 of them have played over, or whatever, 40% have played. And then of all the second round picks, or maybe, first round was probably more than that, but like all the second round picks, like whatever, 50% end up playing, and all the 10th round picks only, you know what I mean? And we're like brutally honest with these kids that were like, yes, you got drafted. It's awesome. But like, there's a lot of work ahead of you. And that's the same for the kids that don't get drafted. There's a lot of work ahead of you and a lot of time. And in some ways, like try to tell these kids, once you kind of over the first initial blow of like not getting drafted, like you might be in a better spot after not getting drafted. If you were going to be a 12th or 16th round pick, like you might be in a better spot next year. If you go to junior B or major midget and you kill it, 1, you can get drafted again, in that major midget draft. But 2, who knows? Maybe Mangiapane. Did I say his name? What is it again?
Mangiapane.
Yeah, Bonnie. Maybe he had that killer year, and then he had like 5 OHL teams wanting them to come to main camp. And you know what I mean? And Barrie was the best fit because they were like losing 5 forwards and you know what I mean? They were the most, like, seemed like they wanted them the most and going to give them the most opportunities. So like, there's that other side of it that like maybe next year, instead of going to a rookie camp and being forced to go to whatever team you're drafted by, even if they're every forward's coming back and there's no chance that you're really going to make it, you're picking, you could have your pick of what teams are best fit for you and location a little bit in terms of proximity to home. And so there's some, I don't want to say positives, but there's some things that can be taken out of it to be looked at, like, hey, maybe this is an opportunity to like prove some people wrong, but also set myself up to be in a really good situation next year. Yeah. So I think that's one thing for the kids that don't get drafted to remember. It is a big blow, especially with social media nowadays. That used to be a lot easier to hide it, because it wasn't out there. Now it's probably more a little bit embarrassing, I would imagine. And I don't look at it that way, but some people might, and if I was a kid now, I'd probably look at it that and be like, oh, I have nothing out there. Nobody's seeing it. Nobody's calling me, whatever. But after that, there's some opportunity in there, and it's not what you wanted to happen, but you got to make the best of it.
Well, yeah. And I think, it comes back to what you said, though, like you got to put the work in, right? Whether you get drafted, you don't get drafted. If you want to play at the next level, you want to play a high level, you have to put the work in. Like you've got to, train and eat right and sleep and, all that kind of stuff. Right. So I think that's the underlying thing for sure. And then the thing about being embarrassed, I think it's just a letdown. I think you just feel like you've let your family down. You've let your coach down, or your strength coach down, or your grandma and grandpa, because he, bought you sticks and helped you get to the rink. And so I just think it's more of you feel like you're a disappointment, which, man, 90% of parents, I'm hoping more than that. 99% of parents, like, I don't put my kids in hockey so one day they can get drafted. I put my kids in hockey so they're good kids. They can be athletic. They can be around other coaches, other players, get to know people, like learn. Like, so at the end of the day, if I don't think any parent would be like, oh man, what a failure, this kid didn't get drafted. You know what I mean? It's just, I don't think that's realistic, right? But I think as young kids, that's how we think. We're just like, oh man, I let everybody down, and that's not the case, But got to keep going, and keep working, obviously, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. the draft happens at 16 years old. Is every kid fully developed? Are they in the most, point that they're going to be? Like, if you don't have a hair on your body yet and you're, at that age, like, I don't think missing out on the draft is the worst thing. And nobody has your rights. Nobody can really force you into doing anything. You get more time. Maybe you play U18 now. There's a U18 draft. There's another window there. Only 3 rounds, but there's another opportunity there. College is still open. There's a lot of stuff that looks into like your age and whether you're born in the first half of a year versus the back half. Like, there are big differences in the development pathways between people born within the same calendar year, but biologically their bodies are like almost different ages and where they are in their development and whatnot. And then to your point, Blazer, about confidence, it's one of the biggest things that we do kind of badly is, we build kids up to have this identity as an athlete. And when they are no longer an athlete, right? And not necessarily saying that they quit immediately after the draft, but a lot of kids, they're going like this, they're chugging along, myself included. And then, usually the draft happens and you start to be okay with doing other things. But for some kids, they have a hard time letting go of that identity of an athlete, especially if they've never really been allowed the opportunity to explore other things like, playing piano or, hanging out with friends at the mall. Like, if all you do, if you're that kid that wears the tracksuit every single day at school till it has holes in it, and all you do is go home and shoot pucks, and then you don't get drafted, and everybody around you is also disappointed, and nobody's there to kind of console you or tell you that it's okay, or this isn't all who you are, it stings you pretty bad, and it can kind of mess up, and that's why we see even professional athletes have a really hard time exiting the sport, because everything that they've done, their whole routine, their whole lifestyle, it's built around this thing, and then it's no longer there. And they turn, to drugs and alcohol and substance abuse and different other kind of behaviors. But yeah, it's important to make sure that kids know that you can still really be highly competitive and want something really, really bad, but it's not the whole you. It's a very, very big piece, but you're still Dwayne Blais or Kevin Galerno or Wade Russell. Like, you're still you, and you get to still be you and stuff. So I think that's an important point to bring up anytime people don't get selected in a draft, because, you could argue that we could have a draft every year to actually get kids when they might be in the right spot to be drafted, right? But we only have 1 or 2. So
yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think a lot of that comes back to, I say this all the time, but I think a lot of it comes back to parenting too, right? At young ages, like exposing your kids to other things. We see it heavily in our sport, and this is not unique to hockey. It's in every sport. Players that play 12 months a year and that play 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 times a week on the ice or training or doing something, or, you know what I mean? And that's fine. But like, why not go golf? Why not go for a bike ride? Go mountain biking with your family or your buddies, or get a skateboard, or, you know what I mean? Go rollerblading, like whatever, but just exposing them to different things. And then also having those conversations with them where, like, dude, you're more than just a hockey player. Like, you're a good person. You're a good, you're a good friend. You're a good son. Like, you're a good daughter. Like, having, like, creating more value than just that sport. Cause that, you're right. A lot of young kids are identified as hockey players. They go to, family dinner and grandpa, oh, how's the hockey going? Hey, how's my little hockey guy? How's my little, you know what I mean? And it's just how you're raised. Right. And so I think for parents, it's like, take a step back a little bit and really ask yourself, like, why are they in the sport? And if your kid's playing AAA and they're really good, and that's fine. Like, yeah, you're going to put more time into that sport because they're good at it. They love it. Right. But I think having a bit of balance is huge for long-term, like, just for, when they're 17, 18 and they, you know what I mean? Maybe they don't love the game as much, or maybe they still do, but they have other things that they can take away, kind of get them off hockey, get them away from the game a little bit, whether it's for an afternoon, a night, a weekend, a week, whatever, it doesn't matter, but just kind of giving them other outlets, And one thing I want to finish the conversation with today is something that I've talked to people about. Wade, you've had some great discussions on this, and Kevin as well, is the mental part of the game. We talk about, like, a Mitch Marner again. Like, if I was Mitch Marner, I was his strength coach or whatever, I would say, listen, he might already be doing this, but almost every golfer has some type of mental coach, right? A mental performance coach, right? If you think of individual sports like tennis and golf and things like that, Olympics, a lot of the Olympic athletes do, but for hockey, I don't think we have a lot. I think some guys do and some girls do, but it's kind of hush hush, or they don't talk about it, or they just don't even do it at all. But I think seeking out some type of, mental performance and just working on that at younger ages. And it could be just mom and dad, doing some exercise with the kids, or just challenging your kids a little bit, or keeping them accountable. But as they get older, especially, I think that's a part of the game that we don't work on enough in sport, is that mental part of the game, and have that mental toughness and knowing how to shut things out, knowing how to battle through stuff. And that is something that I'm more and more interested in, as far as having that as part of the training model, having that as part of, like, the, you talk about off-ice conditioning, you talk about skill development, you talk about practice. So I think mental, performance should be part of that whole thing as well. So just, quickly kind of getting your thoughts on that, if you had any thoughts on that at all. I'll start with you, Kev. Does that kind of come up at all? Or are you kind of thinking about that kind of stuff at all for any, any of the guys, girls you're working with?
I think for sure. I think that any player that wants to be not even elite, that just wants to be, obviously if they do want to progress their sport, but even just for healthy kids nowadays,
Yeah.
I think, that dealing with that mental side or having some help with that is so important, and that's as a kid, maybe they don't know. So as a parent, making sure they're getting that. But speaking directly about the athletes, then absolutely, I think it's massive. And you are right. Like with individual sports, I think they're ahead of some of these team sports, specifically hockey, in terms of like, you're like, oh, it's a team sport, so we don't have to focus on you individually. Well, it's not selfish to focus on you individually and worry about yourself and making sure you're healthy and helping your on ice performance to like get somebody, if they can do that. So I think it's absolutely huge, and I think it can make a big difference. Even to some of the stuff you were talking about, Wade, about like, kids getting out of the sport and, having an identity, and they can help with things other than just your on ice performance. So like, just as an all around athlete or hockey player or human, I think those things can be a massive help, a massive, added bonus to that person.
Yeah, no, for sure. Wait, what do you think? You can kind of take us to school now, because you've been taking a bunch of stuff to university. So
yeah, no, it's a lot of good stuff. Like, one thing I like now is they're starting to be called mental skills more.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's kind of familiar with skill and developing skill. I think a lot of people are on board with that. So I think it's good to think about them as skills. Like, there's something that you probably are going to start out at not very good at, but it is something you can get better at. It's like a muscle, you can grow it. So the example I always use is probably the easiest one, I would say, is like self-talk, right? We all have that voice inside of our head, whether it's literally while you're, just doing something around the house, or you're golfing and you duff a chip and you're swearing at yourself, right? Like, we all have that. And it usually comes out in performance. So how do you address that first thought? Like, my mind wanders a lot. So I've actually used what I've learned in sports psychology just to try to get me more focused. So the moment I notice my thoughts start to wander, I have a self-talk and I say, okay, no more. And I put the plug right in that thought right away. And I'm right back to being here now, whether it's schoolwork or I'm driving or whatever I might be. But it's crazy how much better I've gotten at it over the last kind of couple of months or so, just having learned and applying what I've learned in sports psych to this. But, it's something that I think, unfortunately, in hockey for the longest while is kind of taboo, right? Like, it's so much the language, and I understand it because it is a physical sport, but it's, we're in the trenches, we're together, rah, rah, rah. But, all 14 guys in the locker room are doing that. And you have one kid sitting in the corner with his eyes closed, visualizing, his shift, and what happens to that one kid. What are you doing? That's not going to help you, right? Like, you get chirped. I remember kind of trying to have more of a pregame routine as a kid, and I'd get chirped for it all the time. Like, it's not going to help you. You're not going to play any better. You're just going to turn the puck over. And it's all, ball busting and banter and your buddies. But it's changed a lot now. You hear more about it. Everybody's been talking with Marner and what's going on with him. People are, being way too forward with, giving him advice. Like, I think Marner's going to, figure things out the way that he wants to within his own camp. I don't think he needs Jim on Twitter tweeting at him to get a sports psych. But because of this, now we've gone back to McKinnon's been outspoken about how much a mental coach has helped him. You look at Naomi Osaka in tennis, who's stepped away from the Opens basically because she doesn't like all the press and stuff. And I'm not too well read into it to speak much more about it, but I think the mental side of the game, especially at the professional level, it is, it's almost all of it at that point. Like, they all know how to play hockey. They know what their systems are. They had all the meetings all morning. It's just, are they in the right frame of mind to maintain that competition over time? For kids like Kevy, resilience, self-talk, looking at yourself in a positive manner, those are all mental skills that you can develop. It's just, they need to be introduced to them. And so that's why I'm really fortunate to be getting kind of this stuff from the schooling side. And it's probably one of the biggest things that I want to share more in coaches clinics and things, because I think it's a lot easier than people think. And I think it's a lot more beneficial than people think. You're not going to find many coaches right now in minor hockey that are going to have everybody kind of sit down and do a breathing exercise for 10 minutes before a championship game. But I bet that breathing exercise will help them a whole lot more than 17 different chalk talks right up until the game and all that. So it's coming, but it's getting better. It's just, we need to get it more into the kind of coaching programs and things like that. Like, it needs to be a whole, and you need to have the understanding. Sorry to go a little bit long here. I actually just got off a call today about mental performance. And there was one of my classmates on the call. She herself was a former NCAA athlete, and she had a sports psych. She was a track athlete. But what she really struggled with was she would go there and have a really good session. She felt like there was some growth there. And then the coach didn't have the knowledge to employ any of the things to help her with it, didn't necessarily believe in it. So there's a massive disconnect. So everybody says, get a sports psych coach. Coaches need themselves to have at least a basic understanding so that you can support those athletes. Like you need to understand what they're trying to do, why they're trying to do it, how it's important to them. Some people are more visual. Some people are more self-talk oriented. Some people are more breathing oriented, whatever it might be that works for them. But, a coach needs to understand that. Otherwise you can't support them. You can't help them build that in. Like if any one of our athletes is meeting a sports psych blazer and you never hear from them about it, or the sports psych about it, what can you do at that next ice time to help them, or just to be aware of it, or to allow them that time to do their routine or whatever. Right. So it's getting better, but I think it still has a little bit of a ways to go, but it's in the spotlight more now, which is good.
And I think if you're an elite coach of any sport or at any level, and you think that, sports skill or mental skills or mental, performance is like taboo or not good, then you shouldn't be coaching. Like that is ridiculous to me. And if you don't understand it, that's totally fine. Just don't be ignorant to it. You know what I mean? Because you'll hear that sometimes, you don't need to be doing that stuff. So let's get back to that punch in the bag. Like, well, okay. I think that's really important. I want to go back to what you said about your self-talk, because we all have self-talk 100%. And I'll go back to like golf or even hockey, but let's say golf, like I'm sitting, let's say I got a ball, I've got an iron in my hand and there's a pond, right? So what's the first thing most people think of when they're gonna, I got to get over this pond. What's the first thing most of us think? Like, don't go in the pond, right? Don't go in the pond. Now I'm an unreal shot, so I never hit the pond, but like those kind of self-talk things where or like you say, you chip a duff or you miss a one-timer and you're just giving it to yourself in your head, right? So I guess two questions for you. What do you do when that happens? Because I'm sure your first instinct's like, you suck. Oh, that's terrible. You're so bad at golf, whatever, or bad shot. When you do correct it, what do you say, or kind of how do you correct it quick? And then what have you noticed results wise? Like, let's just talk about golf because you love golf. Have you become a little bit more consistent? Or are you a little bit like kind of even just not even your strokes, but like, are you just hitting the ball more consistently? Are you, better at making contact just because you've got a little bit more patience in the mind type thing?
Yeah, it's a really good question. As far as what to do, typically, again, coming more from a sports psych perspective, usually this is something that you would work out with a sports psych coach. You would sit down, and generally it kind of involves developing a bit of a phrase or a keyword that you would use. And then typically you couple that with like an image that you see, just so you're getting kind of different stimulus that makes it a lot more effective. So an easy one is like a brick wall. So the moment you have a bad thought, you picture a brick wall, and then maybe you have another word, prepared, for example. Like a big thing is always in training, you've prepared for this moment, right? Like all the NHL players that get into a playoff series, they've prepared their whole life for that moment. Like, so taking comfort in that preparedness, maybe that works for them. And you picture a brick wall, and then you hopefully get rid of that thought. Specific to golf and myself, like the one thing I've tried to be a lot better at is like my pre-shot routine, trying to just make it the same before I kind of walk up. Sometimes I would swing, sometimes I wouldn't swing. Sometimes I would stand behind the ball, sometimes I wouldn't stand behind the ball. But just having a consistent routine. Now, when I am standing over the ball, I've actually realized I'm not really thinking about anything. It's just now swing. And so that's helped me a lot. Am I better? I mean, depends on the day. I wouldn't really say even yes, but it is just, I think about what you said way less now. I'm not worried as much about the water being there. I'm a lot more, how am I going to play around, the golf course and whatnot. But again, it's structure that you need to build in before it. Like you can't just be out on the course and saying, I'm going to have a better mental game today. You need to kind of sit down, have a bit of an action plan, have a little bit of a step-by-step process that you're going to do. And then in the beginning, it is, like I said, it's a muscle you're developing. It is work. It's annoying at first. You're probably going to play worse golf at first because you're more focused on building the mental routine than you are actually playing the sport of golf. But to get to that point where you finally stand over the ball and you have nothing, it takes that, you got to build it into that routine there. So hopefully that kind of makes sense and came through to any of the listeners. But this is stuff that I love, and I think it's super important. It is much easier to build in than people think. It's just, again, you got to train it a little bit, and you need to set aside some extra time to make sure that you're doing that.
I love it. That's great, man. It's like any skill though, right? How do you get better at any skill? It's practice. You got to practice, right? And if you can do quality practice, not just quantity, like if I did this every day, all day, that's awesome. But if I just spend a little bit of time on it, but really spend quality time on it, I think that's huge. We talk about this all the time with like shooting pucks. Don't worry about shooting 10,000 pucks, shoot 1,000 good pucks or 500 or 10. Like worry about the quality, not so much the quantity. And I think that's huge. So Kev, is your golf game going to get any better now that Wado's given you a little bit of insight on what's going on between your ears?
Yeah. All I heard him just say was just switch your good ball for a crappy ball quick. And that way, when I hit it in the water, I'm not as upset.
Yeah,
I'm just kidding. I'm gonna help. I can't wait to go play now. I'm gonna be so much better waiting. No, I'm just kidding. That is good stuff.
I'm actually a caddy on my part-time. I double as a sports site coach and a caddy, so it's a pretty good bang for your buck.
I got a lot of stuff, so we're gonna probably need to play at least 36 for you to figure everything out, all my issues.
And I'm also a swing coach too. Yeah, so I'm a 3-in-1.
Okay. Building the portfolio.
Yeah,
perfect.
Well, boys, thanks a lot, man. That was awesome. Always great to catch up and share some fun ideas and stuff on the playoffs, obviously, and OHL stuff and the mental side of the game. It's always great. So thanks a lot, and we will definitely be catching up with you guys soon.
Thanks, boys.
Good seeing you, boys.
All right. To kind of raise that bar.
That extra gear, the first 3 steps.
Huge strides in the performance.
That I might not be the player I am today.